Welcome to 2022 as far as my filming season is concerned, and I'm standing on a bridge designed way back in 1834 by a gentleman called Stephen Putnam, who lived in St Leonard's, and at that time he was responsible for improving the road links between this part of East Sussex and, strange enough, not London, but the Medway towns, Maidstone, places like that. And he copied a lot of his designs from Thomas Telford. This, for many, many years, actually was the main A229 from Hastings to Maidstone, until they improved the road that went directly up between Baldesloe and Vinehall, and that took away the traffic from Battle, and it took away the traffic from here. So now this is a very humble B road, and I'm standing on another B road over the top of it, and I'm on the B road that is actually getting very busy. It's the main thoroughfare between Rye and Battle, and I don't like being out this late in the morning. Going to go across to the other side of the road now. Trouble is, with the cost of fuel and everything, as I think most of you who view this will know, we have a situation going on in Ukraine which doesn't help matters much. So this morning I'm on my way to work at Bodgham Station, and it's about just after 9 o'clock, I suppose, and already bank holiday Easter Sunday traffic is beginning to build up heading to Hastings. I'm in a place called Cripps Corner, which I'll come back to in a minute. I'm doing a kind of a circular tour this morning, and I suppose really it's the opening to an ongoing theme: places you didn't know you didn't know. And I'm just thinking to myself, over there behind those trees, apparently there are 75 World War II anti-tank concrete blocks left that stretch across over the field. Don't know whether I'm going to be in a position to see them, but if I can, I'll film them. If not, well, you know they're there, you can go and have a look. But I think I'll end that here before you get too bored with it. And we're going to discover somewhere that you've been through, more than likely, never took any notice of. And indeed, for years, I don't even recall a signpost for it, until after the 2000s, when East Sussex suddenly started putting nameplates up at places that we all knew of. Maybe were never considered important enough to be named, but perhaps now they're thinking maybe they were important settlements at one time, even though they're now reduced to a handful of houses. But anyway, I'm just going to pan gently round. This is the western end of Cripps Corner, with those nice traditional Sussex weather-boarded houses. Bear that in mind for when I show you something a little later on. There's the sign I want you to see. Swailes Green. Could easily miss that. As soon as you leave Cripps Corner, there it is. But what's there? Have you really noticed? Let's go and have a look, shall we? Unfortunately, I'm taking film into the sun a bit here, but I just wanted to show you Swailes Green farmhouse cottages. They don't look much. Can you imagine? Easter Sunday, the motorbike boys are about. Just imagine looking out of your bedroom window there. Doesn't look much, does it? But then let's pan the camera round. And look at the view you get from your bedroom window. Isn't that lovely? And you know I mentioned those concrete tank traps. Well, there they are. There's 75 of them blighters supposedly. All stretching up the hill there. There we go. I suppose the thought was that if a German tank should ever get this far, he certainly wasn't going to get down the hill over there. And there were pillboxes and everything in the area, so this was quite well fortified in the last war. And there's at least 3 grade 2 listed buildings here in Swailes Green. The cottages themselves are supposedly parts of the 18th century. This farmhouse here, parts of which are supposed to go back to the 18th century. And then of course we have, now here's an interesting, the bloke behind me is fixing his car, so that was a rounded oast at one time, but they've incorporated it and they've put a conical roof on it. That's another one that probably goes back to the 18th century. I haven't been able to find out the origin of Swailes Green, but I can only assume that all of this area perhaps at one time used to belong to a family called Swailes. That's as much as I know, but anyway, isn't that nice? And apologies again if the sun is causing a problem, but I had to show you the oldest building in Swailes Green. This is Lower Swailes Green farmhouse, parts of which are said to date back as far as the 16th century and 17th century. That's older than I am, and that's saying something. Anyway, let's move on, shall we? Filming is almost impossible today. There's motorbikes, cars. It's only just after 9 o'clock in the morning. Normally on a Sunday this would be quiet, but here we are in Cripps Corner. And you see the martlets on the top. Stag's Head. This would have been a centre of hunting at one time. Oh look, the Lycra lads are out, the cyclists are about too. Oh, what a lovely day this is turning out to be for a filmmaker. And there in the middle is the blacksmith. Reminds me of the old song, but I won't sing it to you, about Jones's ale. And next to come in was the blacksmith, his hairy arms all bare. And with his pint of Jones's ale, he has no worries nor care. Throughout the day, his hammer he's swinging. He sings when he hears his anvil ringing. When Jones's ale was new, my boys, when Jones's ale was new. Now, as to the origin of Cripps Corner, and we'll pan round it a little bit while I'm talking, this is an important crossroads on the way from Battle to Rye, Hastings to Bodgham, Maidstone, and difficult to find the origin. But in 1332, the abbot of Robertsbridge Monastery, or Abbey, is recorded as a Mr. Cripps, Walter Cripps I think his name was, spelt with a K. And the local feeling on the matter is that it was quite probable that he had a residence here, possibly a hunting lodge, because if you see over there, it's quite an extensive forest as you look towards Hastings. So this would have been rich hunting ground. There's another motorbike. There's a few older buildings here. This is typical white Sussex weatherboarding, and there used to be a pub right on this corner. A very nice pub, all done out in white weatherboarding, with grade 2 listed, and the planners gave permission for it to be knocked down and replaced by these monstrosities. Now you can't tell me that in this day and age they couldn't have used modern technology like they've done here, eco-friendly houses, but in white Sussex weatherboarding like all the other properties in the area. Sometimes I despair of our planners. Hopefully just a minute or two between traffic. There's looking under the bridge, and you can see how stark the 1834 design was. It's been repaired a bit at the top, obviously, because it has to cope with modern day traffic, but most of it is as originally built, and in those days they built stuff to last. And just one final pan round before we leave Cripps Corner, because this is the kind of architecture. There's a nice well in the garden there, but they should have designed those houses in that replaced the pub. I think it's disgusting that such a contrast has been allowed. Alright, there are more modern houses at the top end of the village, which I'm not going to film. They're sort of 1920s, 1930s bungalows. But this is the old original part of it. And that is Cripps Cottage there, the little one. And looking at the shape of it, I wonder if that was an old toll cottage at one time. You never know. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this short visit to Cripps Corner. Time to move on. Well, here we are in Staplecross. Once again, another one of those newish village signs here. Sussex martlets on the top. Windmill, this one stood here once. Not quite sure what the lion's got to do with it. I wasn't aware there were any lions in East Sussex, but there you go. So Staplecross used to be an administrative centre. This was the place from which the hundred of Staple was governed, and a little bit more about hundreds I'll insert later on. There's 15 grade 2 listed buildings within the village signs here. I haven't got time to go looking for them all. The bus is coming, but what I am going to do is I'm going to wait till the bus is gone, and then we can do a bit more filming. Looking across the field from here, you can see one or two more of these older buildings, once again with the traditional Sussex white weatherboarding. Plenty of birds sung around. Of course, they've all gone quiet now, but there's loads of blue tits in the area. And like most animals and children, they never do what you want them to do when you're filming. But here is probably the oldest building in the village. Solomon's Garden Cottage, look at that. 17th century, thatch roof. That's what it's all about, isn't it? And then as you move further up, you get into more listed buildings. 18th century, 19th century. This place is full of history. Some more lovely buildings here. It's difficult this time of the morning because I don't want to invade people's privacy, and yet these buildings need recording for posterity. because you never know what might happen to them in a few years' time. The planners round here seem to be appallingly inept at giving permission to demolish really good looking historic buildings and replacing them with rubbish. We're just looking at the cross inn now, that's been here many years, although I think the west side is 19th century and they appear to be private flats now, but the main body of the pub, the north wing, that's 18th century, so I'm told, in its origins. And although there's still a bus service through here now every 2 hours from Hawkhurst to Hastings, this used to be the place where the service from Hastings to Tunbridge Wells and Hastings to Maidstone both passed through here. Maidstone buses went straight down, Tunbridge Wells buses turned left. Now I know this because my dad was a bus conductor on Maidstone District, and the crews used to come out of Hastings on certain journeys, and when they got here the buses would stop, one would come in the opposite direction and the crew would simply swap over and each would go back to where they started from. Easy, wasn't it? Now looking at that building there, you see the cow on top of what was obviously an oast house, but I'm looking at this building in front of it and there is a housing for a pulley of some kind. And that would suggest to me that at one point in time there was a brewery here. And there I think is the clue as to why there's a lion on the village sign. The lion, presumably the lion heart of England, sits atop the war memorial here, that itself is made out of Portland stone. And to finish with, there's another lovely row of cottages. 19th century I would guess those, maybe. Anyway, I think that concludes today's little journey into places you didn't know you didn't know. I hope you've enjoyed it. Now, it doesn't really matter whether you're religious or not, but it has to be said, as far as the history of education in this country is concerned, we owe it to the religious institutions, and whatever you think of the aspects of particular faiths, it doesn't seem to matter which one, Methodist, Catholic, Church of England. If it wasn't for them and their desire to educate their children, we might, and I accept it's a big might, we might not have the education service that we have in this country today, and we certainly wouldn't have the variety of interest in buildings that we have, because a lot of our older buildings, like this one here in Staplecross, were built by the churches, and this was built by the Methodists. And it's interesting that the Methodists were non-conformists, but I can't say that their buildings were non-conformist, because I've seen a few Methodist schools around, and the ones that were built around about the same time, and I'm guessing around about the late 1800s, when the move to church schools really began to take off. The Methodist schools seem to have a certain standardised format with the type of windows that they used and the gables and the roofs. I don't know, maybe it's just me as I've gone on around looking. But anyway, this is a typical church school building, and now in use of course as part of the main education service, but with a religious leaning and probably supported to some extent by the Methodist Church. It's just down the road from the main village, and there's some more of the old weatherboarded cottages there. But the thing I want to show you as I walk across the road is the view from the playground. I'm going to try and get the camera. As I say, the thing I really want to show you is the view from their playground. I'll probably get arrested for doing this, but it's quite innocent, I assure you. Look at that view over the Rother Valley. What a lovely, healthy place for young children to get their primary education. Do you know, we're so lucky in this country to have places like this, and yet the move to close down the country schools continues apace. What a shame. I think we're losing so much when they do close. Some of you might remember my epic series last year, The Three Rivers of Rye, and I was talking about the River Breed. Well, when I was growing up around this area in the 50s, this was actually known as part of the River Breed, until they decided to cut that back until just the A21 side of Selscombe. And this is now the River Line, and I'm actually in, I suppose it must be the valley of the River Line, near Whatlington, which is the next parish up, heading east from Battle. And there is the sign to tell you you're just entering Whatlington parish. I don't intend to do any filming there because, to be quite honest, there's not a great deal as yet that I've discovered, but that could change. At the moment I've no plans to film there. And I've just made things as clear as mud, I think, so let's just take a step back. This group of houses, that down here, is way down in the valley where we now have the River Line that was the Breed. Why it was changed, I've absolutely no idea. Which, for the sake of the documentary, we will call Lower Whatlington. But then you have to drive 3/4 of a mile or more up the hill onto the A21, where you find what we might call Upper Whatlington. Now, yes, there are some older buildings there. There's the pub, which is white weatherboarded, and there's the old Methodist chapel, which is now, I think it's a fireplace sales room. Apart from that, I'm not at all sure that there's anything really too much worth filming. But to be fair, I haven't been down that bit of the A21 for years. I'm probably going to have to do a journey down there just to have a look-see, but for the time being, we'll leave that as it is. I'm trying to find places you didn't know, and most people will have travelled along the A21, but maybe not so many of you will have come down this road going down towards Battle. So I'm hoping I found somewhere you didn't know. And I've learnt a few things today, so hopefully that clears it up. We're in what I would call Lower Whatlington, and let's carry on, shall we? But here is the little church, little wooden church, one of the old, I guess, as opposed to a tin tabernacle, a wooden tabernacle. Quite a nice little place, but you see all these little rivers and streams all over the place that head out somewhere or other into some of the bigger streams and bigger rivers. But the bridge is quite interesting. It looks to have a certain age. I can't see any date on that coping stone there, on the crown stone or whatever they call it. Let's just zoom in and see. No. My guess, it's going to be 18 something, I think, to be honest. Although looking at it, I said the lower stone bricks look newer than the upper ones. But anyway, we've come down to this little place. The road is a bit busy this time of day. There's one or two interesting little buildings here. I'm going to cross the road. There's a bit more of a flow on this side, although again there's an outfall of some kind, So that's what's causing the rippling, because the main little river itself doesn't seem to have much of a flow on it. There it is. I've lost it. Bear with me. There. Coming out of a pipe somewhere, so it's draining the land there. Not the best of days. We've had a lot of sunshine this week, and now we've got this rather dull windy weather. But it's amazing. Things you didn't know, and these things I didn't know until I've actually started taking more notice of them as I've gone around. Well, I've walked up to the main entrance to the Leaford Place Hotel because I wanted to show you the interesting topiary in this garden of theirs. That's quite nice, isn't it? And you've got a nice little shape of the bushes at the edge there. I'm doing a voiceover here because when I was commentating on the original recording, I came out with a load of old drivel about this house we see on the left. It's actually a 19th century building. It's called the Mill House. So I guess there was quite a thriving industry in this lower part of Whatlington at one time. And then looking up the hill there towards that very interesting building, certainly got very Gothic style windows. The parish church is just round the corner. I'm wondering if this was once a clergy house or connected to the church, but I can't find any more information about it, sorry. It's always difficult filming during the middle of the day because I don't want people to think I'm intruding on their privacy. But there's two more buildings which I must show you. First one is the old rectory here, and that's as close as I'm going to go to it because there's people at home. But you see the lovely half timbered building there, and the other one is the thatched cottage. I can't really get much closer to film it any better, but look at that lovely traditional thatched roof up there. And that's just a couple of buildings out of 4 or 5 that are in this area. And just walking back to the car, this building here I thought might have been a church is actually what is now the Whatlington Village Hall. This is now Whatlington Village Hall. There we go. And I've just been talking to a gentleman up the road there, where I thought the topiary was part of the Leaford Place Hotel. It's not. It's his garden. And he was a bit concerned as to what I was doing filming up there. And when I explained to him, he was quite content with that. And he told me that the garden and the topiary was first done about 70 years ago. They've had it for some years now, and he assures me it's not going to become a car park. He has no plans to change it, and occasionally the hotel asks permission for their wedding parties to have photos taken in it. So that's going to be preserved, which is very nice to hear. And as he said, this little group of houses, it's a nice quietish place given the traffic on the road. They have no plans to change it, and you know what? I'm very pleased to hear that. I promised earlier that I would try and explain something about the hundreds. It's a very complicated issue, and I would encourage you to do your own research on that. But many years ago, and I'm going back centuries, the whole of the country was divided into these hundreds. They were local administrative districts, which seem to have been adopted in some number by the Saxons as they divided up the country into their separate kingdoms. And after the Norman invasion, it would seem that these divisions were still prevalent in the counties, but each county was then subdivided into a shire, and we do have records of sheriffs in the Sussex shires from the 12th century, although obviously this was after the time of the Domesday Book. Now these hundreds were gathered together in further administrative units known as rapes, and there were 6 in Sussex. Typical of Sussex, got to do things different to everybody else, and Kent to some extent. In Sussex, the 6 major divisions were known as rapes, and in Kent they were known as lathes, and they were basically just strips that ran across the county. Now, we don't know how old these rapes are, because one of the rapes was Hastings and one was Lewes. They can't predate Norman times because Lewes didn't have a castle before the Normans arrived, and neither did Hastings. In fact, Hastings wasn't Hastings in 1066, so we can discount that. But there obviously were these divisions which were then strengthened by the Normans. And in the end, Sussex ended up with 6 rapes: Chichester, Arundel, Bramber, Lewes, Pevensey and Hastings. The criteria for each one seems to be you had to have a castle, you had to have access to a waterway, either a river, canal or the sea, as in the case of Hastings, and all 6 of those certainly had that at the time. It's thought that the Sussex martlets, the 6 birds on the Sussex flag, refer to the 6 rapes, and indeed the Sussex flag was known to exist and before the 17th century, so you can draw your own conclusions for that. Now, each of these rapes continued to be divided into hundreds, and as I say, I think one of the nearest hundreds to Hastings at the time was called Gostrow. I'm not entirely sure on that, but certainly Staplecross was the centre of administration for its own hundred, the hundred of Staple. This situation continued right the way through until we had the Municipal Corporations Acts of 1835, and then the subsequent one in 1882, which more or less established the current day system of local government as we know it. Sorry if that's a bit garbled. I've tried to make some sense of it, but please, if you're interested in finding out more about the hundreds, because they were groups of individual settlements, patches if you like, that varied between 40 acres and a few thousand acres, it's worth a study on its own. I don't propose to do it because I really don't think my brain could cope with all that info. But anyway, I hope I've at least given you an insight into the system of hundreds and rapes. If you've got any questions, do put them in the comments and I'll try and answer them if I can. But otherwise, for now, I think I'll end this video there. I hope you've enjoyed this first look at places you didn't know. Coming up next will be my travels in Cornwall, because I have responded to the suggestion from several people that it may be better to do it while it's fresh in my mind rather than wait until the winter, where I might have forgotten things I was going to say. And I tend to agree with them, because this last winter's been quite hard, particularly remembering things about Scotland. So that'll be coming up over the next few weeks. And then in the meantime, I'm out filming again, looking for some more of those hidden places that some people that have lived in Sussex all their lives don't even know exist. So do keep joining me, and I'll keep trying to find you the unusual. So I'll be seeing you.